So I've got here kind of the basics of what you need to create a website. Just 3 documents: an HTML page, a CSS style sheet, and a JavaScript document. So I'm going to kind of start by reviewing a little bit of what we've already covered on Friday and today, just so we're kind of all on the same page. So again, HTML, everything is made up of tags. And these tags define what actually gets displayed on the page itself. And let's take a kind of take a look a little bit about what all these tags do. So doc type HTML, it's pretty self-explanatory. It just says the type of this document is HTML. The HTML tag, again, just defines the HTML document as a whole. So everything in between these HTML tags is the website itself. Then we have head. So the purpose of the head is to define information about the web page that doesn't actually appear on the web page itself. So we've got these meta tags here. So it represents essentially metadata. So we have, like, for example, the character set, we're using UTF-8. We've kind of got, things like content, what the width of the device is, stuff like that. And then we have the title, and the title is what actually shows in your tab. So when I go to, GitHub, just GitHub, not Lima Platoon. So the document title here would be GitHub. So everything that's important for your document to know in order to function correctly, but won't actually show up in the actual page, goes in the head most of the time. What other kind of information can we put in the head?
I think that's where the search engine stuff goes.
I heard someone say links, right? Links to what?
Like external resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is also where we can link up to the other 2 parts of our front end page. Our CSS, so we can use the link tag. And then I can just use the relative path, which is style.css. If I want to include my JavaScript, I wouldn't use the link tag. I would actually use the script tag. And I would say src equals app.js. And I'm also going to put some words here, async defer. And so what these tags do is this one links us up with our CSS. This one links us up with our JavaScript. I'll get more into kind of what async and defer mean in a little bit, because I want to focus more on the HTML for now. All right. So after the head, we have the body. And the body is where we actually put our content, what we actually want to show up on the page. And so most of our other tags that we use show up inside there. So let's say we wanted to have, let's say we wanted to have something that displayed the title of our website in big letters. What tag would make most sense for that?
H1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, H1, or one of its sisters, H2 through H6. So you can say, this is a heading. And if I open up this page, open index.html, there we go. There it is. All right, what if I wanted a paragraph of text under that?
A p tag.
Yep, P. P stands for paragraph. It automatically has a line break to put it in a separate paragraph from the preceding element. And if I wanted to have a link, I could use the a tag. which is nice. And I could also put another A tag, like this is another link. All right, but what if I want these two links on separate lines? What would help me do that?
A break.
Basic.
I heard someone say a break. So what tag do we use to have a line break? Because even if I hit enter here, it shows up the same here because HTML doesn't actually care about line breaks. So there is a
BR.
tag. Yep.
BR.
Yep. BR. BR is one of the few tags that doesn't actually need a \BR because all it does is insert a line break, like so. And if we wanted to be a little more dramatic, for our next section, we could add something called an HR and put another P tag down that saying this is a second paragraph. And the HR adds what's called, it's short for horizontal rule. So it adds just a horizontal line across the entire screen. All right, so again, that's the basics of HTML. You've seen it a couple times now. All right, so now let's say we want to add some styling to this stuff. Where do we go to add styling to our page?
Style.css.
Yep, style.css. And let's say we want to make our.
You're in app.js.
Nope, thank you. Let's say we want to make our title a little fancier. I could do H1. Maybe up the font size a bit. Maybe put it in the center of the page using text align. Let's make the color something else. Like, let's make it a nice. Let's see what. Let's make it just not goldenrod. Let's see. Dark green. There we go. Now let's say, for sake of argument, I have another H1 down here. And say this is a subsection. But I don't want this as a subject section to look at the same as this is a heading. What can I do to make sure that these H1s follow different rules?
Give them separate classes.
I could give them either separate classes or separate IDs. Either one will work. So let's say we might have many subsections. So let's give this one a class. Class, call it, subheader, something like that. And if we wanted to give separate rules to subheader, I would do something like subheader. So dot subheader is the things for accessing a members of a class. I could say I want the font size for this one to be only 22 px, text align left. We make it a different color, like Rebecca purple. I don't even know what that is, but I like it. And so so this was a class. We could also add an ID to something, right? So let's say, for example, this paragraph right here is a very special paragraph that I want to follow unique rules. So I could give it ID called intro paragraph, for example. And how do I change the ID, or how do I select something with the ID of intro paragraph? I can't just write intro paragraph, so I need to put something in front of that, right?
Pretty sure it's pound.
Yep, the pound sign. So I could say, font size 16 px. Make this one in the center as well. Okay. Any questions? So that's, again, just kind of a quick review of HTML and CSS and the basics. What questions do you have about that?
I'm just curious, best practices wise, wouldn't it be more semantic to use an H2 instead of styling another H1 as a subheader?
You are absolutely right. Semantically, that would make more sense. But this was mainly for the sake of demonstration.
Got it, sorry.
No worries.
Are for the H1s, H2, H3, and all those, do those really get used a lot still, or do things just get done through CSS styling?
I would say they do see use. I couldn't tell you exactly, what ratio of people use H1, H2 through 6, and what people just style P tags or H1 tags differently. But I always think it's just the best practice is to find the right tool for the job. And if the right tool for the job is an H2, great. If it's a styled H1, go for that instead.
Okay.
And that often is a matter of experience. The more you work with HTML, the more you'll learn what tools you have available. Because sometimes you'll find something that does something, you'll spend hours fiddling around with CSS to make something happen exactly. And then you'll find there's an HTML tag that does a lot of that work for you. All right, so now the question is, all right, we can just throw tags together willy-nilly like this. The problem is it's not good to just start writing HTML from nothing and just kind of hoping everything turns out to the best. It's always good to develop a plan for this. So I'm going to quickly gotta find a particular image I want to show you. What did I do wrong? All right. So let's say we wanted to develop a web page that looks like this. So we could say, maybe our UX designers or UI designers just gave us this kind of mock-up they created, and they said, we want to make this. So what we need to do is we need to get a plan to figure out what elements we actually need. And to do that, we're going to be doing something called wireframing. And wireframing is essentially the practice of drawing out exactly what you want, often by hand, but there are also tools available on the internet that'll help us do that as well. And then essentially planning, all right, how do we turn this general blueprint, you can call it a blueprint, and translate it into actual HTML. So let's see here. Does anyone, Tom, do you have a favorite wireframing tool that's free?
I generally just use like Google Slides just because I'm.
Yeah.
But like we can also use that. I don't know that Limnu.
Yeah, let's try let's see if Limnu is any good. I've never tried wireframing with Limnu before, but first time for everything. It's got to log in. Oh, okay. Do they have a box tool? That would be useful. Yeah, they do. Perfect. All right. So they have a box tool. So let's take a look. So the first thing we have up here is kind of a header with company name on the left, a few links on the right. So I'll try drawing a box right here. So that box is just the header in general. Then we'll need one box for the company name. And then 4 boxes for this other stuff. Ooh, I like this. This is fun. All right. So there's our header right there.
And we can have the option to, depending on how competent we are with CSS, we can have those 4 boxes encompassed in another box.
Yep. Yeah, we could put everything inside this like one big box like so. And then you see here, they got pricing and this kind of paragraph right here. And looking at these, since they're both centered like this, I'm kind of assuming that these are in their own kind of box. So maybe like one kind of larger box right here. Then we've got a header box and a paragraph box. And then down here, we've got these kind of 3 options. So we could put them all in one larger box. Then each one is kind of its own box, like so. And then we can kind of see, just based on the visual cues here, all right, we kind of have like a subsection here for the title, Free, Pro, Enterprise. Like so. And notice, like, I'm not trying to make this exact or anything like that. It's okay if your wireframe is crude. That's kind of the point. The wireframe is a planning tool. It's not necessarily something you're going to show to, your customers or anything. And then seeing here, we've kind of got one big block of text, and then separate lines of other text, and then a button at the bottom. So maybe like so. Going to get a few of these. And then big button at the bottom. All right. So here's my wireframe that more or less is giving me a roadmap to what I want to create this. So let's try translating. So I'm actually going to.
Are you looking for any small change in text and size? Typically, anything that's different is going to be its own box.
I usually find so the difference between this right here and these is I can tell that this is one paragraph because it's quickly build an effective pricing table for your potential customers. But all of these appear to be kind of on their own separate little line breaks. This isn't one long sentence broken up. This is separate kind of clauses all put separately. So just looking at this, I would say, okay, these are probably just separate p tags. So p, 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 p. So
and what about like the dollar amount / month? Would those be separate?
Yeah, like looking at this, I would assume maybe this is probably some kind of H tag perhaps.
And then on the bottom, install a list, right? Like an unordered list, basically. It
could be an unordered list. By default, an unordered list has bullet points, and this doesn't. So a list is one way of approaching this. This could also just be several p tags in a row. It's kind of up to us to figure that out. So kind of going back here for a bit, I need to figure out, okay, we assume this large box is kind of the HTML body. We need to figure out like what other tags we want. Let's see if this is going to look good at all. So let's say this top one, it's a navigation bar. So let's make it a nav element. Can we make that any smaller? Nope, one sec. Okay, that works. So we could say this is a nav. And then maybe this is kind of the company logo, or not even the logo, just the name of the company. So this could be just a p tag for now, and we can always change later. And let's say these are probably p tags as well. And then that last one is a button, just based on its shape. So maybe I would use a button tag for that. Something like that. And so by doing this, we kind of start to see, okay, here's the shape of our app. Here's the shape of our HTML. It's all starting to make sense. And this way, we kind of have a plan going into it. So very often, you'll find that when you are planning out, like when you're in the beginning stages of a project and you're getting to the front end section, your manager, the first thing they're going to ask you for is probably going to be some wireframes. And again, so limnew seems to work pretty well. This is definitely good for working remote since it's a good collaborative environment. But if you just Google free whiteboarding tools, there's a ton out there. You can also use Google Slides. Google Slides is actually very effective for creating wireframes. What questions do you have about wireframing? Okay. So in that case, I'm actually going to move on, and we're going to talk a bit about how JavaScript can interact with your HTML document. So again, JavaScript is the programming language of the web. It can update and change the HTML and CSS of your web page in real time. It can also do everything that JavaScript any coding language can normally do. It can calculate things, validate data. Everything we've been doing with Python up until now, JavaScript can be running in the background. Get rid of that. But the main thing JavaScript does is essentially to interact with your web page. And we interact with that, and we link our web page to our JavaScript using the script tag. So the src, again, is where the source of the JavaScript. Then we have these async and defer options. And essentially what these are for is they prevent your JavaScript from running before they make sure the JavaScript doesn't run until after the page is loaded. So let's try something right here. Well, actually, that won't actually show us very much, will it? Because it's going to be so quick. All right, I'll demonstrate something in a little bit, because first I need to show you how to actually access things. So let's say I'm going to put a button on my page. And I just want to make something very simple, something that just creates an alert when the button is clicked. And I'm going to give the button a unique ID. I'll just call this one alert button. And the idea is when I click this, I want an alert to pop up telling me what's going on. So what JavaScript allows us to do is it allows us to, JavaScript has ways of accessing and navigating what's called the DOM, or the Document Object Model. Has anyone encountered this phrase before, Document Object Model? So the DOM is essentially shorthand for your web page, and specifically what actually shows up when we actually load the page itself. So whenever we inspect something, use the Google Chrome inspector, this right here is essentially the DOM. And this is what JavaScript can interact with. And JavaScript is able to find specific elements and attach events to them so that something actually happens on when certain things occur. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my JavaScript file knows which button I'm talking about when I click on it. So I'm going to say, something like let button equal, I'm going to use the document. And document is JavaScript's main way of interacting with the DOM. It just says, look through the document and find me something. And I'm going to use a method called getElementById, which says, get me the first element with a specific name, which in this case is going to be alert button. Did I do that right? Alert button? Yep. So if I console.log button, I should see something there, right? And when we're working with web pages, JavaScript output always goes to this console right here. So as we can see, getElementById got me this HTML element. But, and this is what I was trying to talk about before, let's see what happens if I get rid of async defer. It gives me null instead. And the reason it does that is because without async and defer, what actually happens is the JavaScript page runs. So it tries to get document.elementById alert button and console.log it. But the DOM itself hasn't actually been loaded yet. And so it tries to find a button and doesn't find anything because the DOM is empty at this point. But by adding async and defer to my script tag, that just says, wait until the DOM is loaded before you run the JavaScript file.
Hey, Noah, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I learned some JavaScript a while back, and I never used to use async defer. Is this actually a working replacement for like the onReady stuff that you would use in jQuery, or is this something that came after that? So
I believe so. This is something that essentially allows you to JavaScript ES6, the newest version of JavaScript, essentially has allowed a lot of things that we would need jQuery for to just does natively now. So async defer is one of those things that we don't need to add a listener saying when the DOM is loaded, do this. We can just tell JavaScript, don't run until the DOM is loaded.
Yeah, I remember running into a problem with DOM being loaded, but we didn't have the async defer. And I used jQuery as an example because I can't remember actually on offhand like what the actual like pure JavaScript way was to like make the page wait, or make the JavaScript wait until the page is loaded.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up jQuery actually. So jQuery is a JavaScript library, kind of like a framework that is still very much in use, though is starting to lose popularity because the newest version of JavaScript, like I said, adds a lot of functionality that we would otherwise need jQuery for. So we're not going to get into jQuery ourselves in our curriculum because we're focusing on newer tools. But just be aware, if you see something with a $sign and then some stuff after it, that's probably jQuery. So again, if you're used to jQuery, you honestly don't usually need it very much anymore, but you'll probably encounter it in the wild anyway. So it's worth researching on your own.
And the old way to load your JavaScript is to include that script tag at the very bottom of your HTML page inside the body tag at the very bottom.
Yep.
And that's where you wouldn't, but you wouldn't include the async defer or defer async.
Yeah, so you could actually move the script down here, and then after everything is loaded, and it'll kind of work a similar way. But I just find it easier just to use async defer.
Yep.
Any other questions about about this, the DOM so far, how we managed to essentially grab our HTML element and assign it to this variable?
No, it's, I guess, what would we be expecting to actually show up in the console log there? When,
So I expect the HTML element to show up in the console.log. Because document.getElementById just says, literally, give me this entire HTML element. And we can see here, that's where it is, exactly as the HTML is written on the page. And now that we've assigned it to a variable, we can actually manipulate it. And one way we can do that is we could say, all right, button.onClick. And what that does, onClick, is what's called an event listener that says when a certain user-generated event happens, run a function. And I'm going to set the run a function to an anonymous arrow function. And what I want it to do is say return, I want it to return an alert that says, hello, Code Platoon. So if I click this, the page says, hello, Code Platoon. And every time I click it, it'll keep doing that. And actually, if I inspect this right now, I wonder if okay, it doesn't actually show up here. But we can see event listeners. There's a click event listener that says button alert button. And here's our handler. Here's the function that's actually running. So this is kind of the very, 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 very basic way that JavaScript interacts with the DOM. Is you find elements, and there are many methods that allow you to do that besides getElementById. For example, if you want something with a class name, if I wanted to get, let's see here, my subheader, I could say, let subheaders equal subheader equal document.getElement by class. So there's getElements by class name, which will give me a list of everything with this particular class name. So subheader. So by console.log subheader, it gives me an HTML collection which has one element in it right now. It gives me all this information about this particular H1. And there are dozens of other selectors. You can get things you can get everything with a p tag. You could get the first thing you find with a p tag, everything like that. And we'll talk more about kind of more advanced ways to what's called traversing the DOM. So essentially moving from parents to children very often. So and this isn't a good example, but the body has all these different children. But we could have an A tag with another A tag inside of it, or a P tag with a span inside of it. And that allows you to navigate from using JavaScript from one element to another. But again, once we've selected the things we want, we can add event listeners, and we can manipulate the DOM. We can manipulate it all we want. So I could say something like subheader dot. Let's see, what's another good event listener? I want on mouse over. Let's look that up because I've forgotten. JavaScript event listeners. This is the add event listener thing, which we don't always need to do. Let's try JavaScript. I'm looking for mouse over specifically. Might be probably on mouse over. Is that just all it is?
Oh.
Yep, on mouse over. And we could do something silly like, subheader dot style dot, I believe it's font size. Let me look this up. So JavaScript style font size. How do you change that? Style dot font size. So font size equals 100 px, just to get a little silly with it. Let's see if that works. All right, no, not quite working. Oh, wait, I know why. Because it's, since I used get elements by class name, subheader is actually a collection. It's not just one thing. So let's say I want subheader. I just want the first one, like so. So I'm just getting the first thing from my collection of elements. Let's see if that fixes it. There we go. So I put my mouse over it and the text got huge. And that's just kind of scratching the surface of ways JavaScript can manipulate your web page. What questions do you have about that? Okay, so we have some challenges for you today. One of them is a wireframing exercise. So it's going to challenge you to create your own wireframe. And again, you can use Limnu, you can use Google Slides, you can even use pencil and paper if you want. These are all valid options. Then we're going to have another one where we're going to challenge you to, it's kind of like the Hacker News thing, but a little bit more trickier, because we're actually going to be having you use HTML and CSS to recreate your LinkedIn profile as exactly as you're able to. And then finally, the guess a number challenge is going to be really challenging your ability to create something that uses HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all in sync with one another. Any other questions before I stop the recording? Okay, in that case, I will let you get to it.